Hello, welcome to the Best Boss podcast, where we're embarking on a journey to research, rethink, and redefine what makes people really best bosses. I am so honored to introduce Amer Kaissi. Amer is a great lover of coffee. He is a fan of Manchester United, unlike me with Wrexham. It's okay, we'll forgive him. And actually, a lot of 90s music. What he's less inclined to tell you is that he's an award-winning professor at Trinity College. He's an executive coach, he's a speaker, and he's an author of a really terrific book called Ambitious, The Power of Low Ego and High Drive Leadership. Welcome, Amer.
Hey, welcome, Diane. How are you?
Good. Tell me a little bit about your background.
My background is in public health and healthcare administration. I have been in academia for the last 25 years. I prepare students who want to go and lead healthcare organizations, and I teach courses in management and leadership and public speaking. And in the last 10 years or so, I'd say I kind of did a little bit more than just my regular job at the university as a professor. So I've been an executive coach. I've written a couple of books on leadership, and I speak and hold workshops with leaders all over the country on leadership related issues.
I first came across you during your second book, The Intangible Traits of High Performing Leaders. Is that where the concept of humility first started?
Yes, absolutely. So that book that you're referring to, what I tried to do there is I tried to look at all the scientific literature on leadership, and I wanted to explore and uncover the traits of high-performing leaders, especially in healthcare.
Hmm.
And that literature, those studies showed that there are four main traits of high-performing leaders, and they were surprising traits because most people would expect confidence and courage and stuff like that. But those four traits were actually compassion, generosity, kindness, and humility. So
Hmm.
I started talking about these four traits and about their importance for leaders. And people were very interested in learning about them, but the one that people especially asked about was humility. There
Hmm.
was there was a lot of misunderstandings about humility. What is humility is about? Does it mean that you lack confidence? Does it mean you sit on the sidelines? Does it mean you never talk about yourself? So that led me to do some additional research on humility, and that in result led to me writing another book, which is Ambitious: The Power of Low Ego and High Drive Leadership.
So talk to me about what is ambitious?
Yeah. So the research that I did on humility showed that, first of all, humility in leadership is a strength. And I think most people would agree with that. Most people would say, yeah, humility is a strength.
Yeah.
Of course, no one's going to argue against humility. But what the research showed, and I think that was the contribution there, is that it's a strength, but it can be a superpower when combined with ambition. So
Hmm.
humility is necessary, but not sufficient for success in leadership. It's that it's when humility and ambition are together, that's when the magic starts to happen. So especially in difficult times, and most leaders today, whatever field they're in, they would say, yes, we are leading through difficult times, we are leading through uncertain times. During these difficult times, the best leaders are those who can connect with humility, but they also elevate with ambition, right? Because
Yeah.
it's you need both at the same time.
Is it? It's at the same time. It's not step one, step two.
Well, I mean, people are going to come to them as step one, step two, because for some people, humility comes more naturally, and they have to work on the ambition. So for them, step one is humility, step two is ambition. For others, it's ambition that comes more naturally, and they have to work on their ego, they have to work on their humility, so the steps are reversed. But the outcome, I think, especially in order to lead when times are unpredictable or not straightforward, is to have them both at the same time. Now, you're not going to have both at 100% all the time. Different situations will require you to dial up one and dial down the other one. But in general, you want to be leading with both humility and ambition.
Give me an example of where you saw it in place or not in place.
Oh, absolutely. And I'll start with a fun example, not necessarily in a typical business organization. So I live in San Antonio. As you mentioned, I teach at Trinity University, and here in San Antonio, the only professional team that we have is the San Antonio Spurs. And the San Antonio Spurs, as everyone knows, really established a dynasty in sports between 99 and 2014. I mean, they over that period, they reached the playoffs 17 times, won 5 NBA titles, had a 70% percentage win, blah, 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 right? Et cetera, et cetera. Now, who could be credited for that? Well, a lot of people will credit Coach Popovich, who was a very humble and ambitious leader, and people also credit Tim Duncan, the captain of the team throughout that time period. And Tim Duncan was not a flashy player. He was very humble, very self-aware. He knew what he was good at. He knew what he was not good at. He treated everyone the same way. He treated everyone with respect, with kindness, with compassion. But man, he was ambitious. I mean, he was fiercely competitive. Now, you may look at him and you may not notice that, but deep inside, he wanted to win all the time. There's a famous story about Tim Duncan back in 2013, after he had won 4 NBA titles with the Spurs. So the Spurs, the organization, came to him and said, "We want to renew your contract, and we want to give you a lot of money because he's a superstar, right?" And Tim Duncan said, "Actually, I want to get paid half of what you're giving me." And they're like, "What? To
Wow,
get paid
that's
half?" Exactly. That's very odd. And he's like, "Yes, because there's the NBA salary cap." And he's like, "I wanted to use the rest of the money so we can bring in more players because I want to keep on winning. And the team right now is not where it should be." So that's what they did. Now, his humility is what allowed him to accept to get paid half what other superstars were getting paid. But it's the ambition, it's the fierce competitiveness that told him, "We are not where we should be. We need more players, and I want you to use my salary for that." The following year, with the reinforcements that they had, the Spurs won their 5th NBA title with Tim Duncan, reinforced their status as one of the dynasties of sports in the history of sports.
So one without the other wasn't going to be as successful.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's the main premise from this, idea of being a ambitious leader. And obviously, ambitious is a made up word. You kind of have to make up a new word when you write a leadership book, as you know.
It rings pretty true. Do people gravitate more towards one than the other? Have you just seen?
That's a really interesting question. And I think it depends on the culture of the organization. I
Mm,
think there are some organizations, possibly on the not-for-profit side, possibly on the healthcare side, where people gravitate more towards humility and what it entails, right? The generosity, the kindness, the empathy, the compassion. Whereas in some other organizations, I think it's the ambition, it's the drive that people would gravitate towards. I've worked with some organizations where ambition is a dirty word, where people do not want to admit that they're ambitious because they're fearful that that is interpreted as someone who is, a backstabber or someone who will stop at nothing. And really, if we understand ambition well, ambition is not just ambition for yourself. Of course, that's very important and that's valid, but it's ambition for the team, ambition for the organization, ambition for the customers or the patients or the community that you are serving. So it's not a narrow understanding of ambition.
one of the qualities of best bosses that we're seeing again and again is she grew me. She saw something in me that nobody saw before. Gave me challenges that I nowhere near thought I was ready. That not easy bosses, but people that really wanted you to maximize your potential. And that ambition, not just for you, but in others as well. I have a question. Can you
Mhm.
can you grow humility or ambition? Can you grow it if you don't have it? What is your thoughts?
Yeah, I'd say absolutely yes. And that is the premise of the book. That's the premise of the leadership work that I do
Yeah,
with
give us some
with
advice.
leaders.
Like, what if I'm high on the humility and I think maybe high on the humility or high on the ambition and low on the other ones? Like, what do
Sure.
I do?
Yeah. Let's just share a few tips. Um, First, if you're high on humility but you're working on ambition, right? What do you need to work on? Well, I think in that case, humility may be getting in the way. Just humility by itself is getting in the way. You're not putting yourself out there. You're shying away from having difficult conversations. You're not advocating on behalf of your team for resources, right? You're sitting on the sidelines. In meetings, you are not really vocal. You're not appropriately assertive. So in that case, you have to learn the skills to have these difficult conversations. You have to develop the confidence to put yourself out there, speak up in big meetings with powerful stakeholders. Now, on the other hand, if you got ambition covered, but you're working on humility, here we need self-awareness. We need some time for self-reflection, for introspection. We need to work on open-mindedness, right? Leaders that are very ambitious but not humble enough, they impose their opinions. I work with a lot of leaders, and in their meetings, no one else talks but them, right? It's a monologue, it's not a meeting. And for those leaders, we say, you have to talk last, you have to talk less, you have to ask more questions and make less statements. So there's definitely a lot of different ways that leaders can reach that sweet middle spot of ambitious leadership, whether they're coming to it from a strong humility or a strong ambition starting point.
Yeah, I would think that somebody may naturally gravitate towards one versus the other, but just like emotional intelligence can change all the time. It can definitely increase, but the cornerstone for me is self-awareness. And it's really important to know when my early warning signs hit, when I'm too high on one at the detriment of another, similar to a polarity, and to know when that happens. I often am asked, why did you start a podcast? You have a successful coaching business. Why did you start a podcast? I really had to sit down and do a massive self-reflection on why I'm starting this journey to find the best bosses, and why I was doing it. But that self-awareness of where I am on, especially with humility and ambition, is key, so I don't derail myself on one versus the other. When you think about people who think about their favorite boss, matter of fact, I need to ask you, who is the best boss you ever had? And I totally am putting you on the spot because I didn't prep you for that one.
No, absolutely. And it's not a hard question at all, because there's one that just is a very obvious one for me. So a little bit of background. So I came to the US back in 99 for graduate school, and at the University of Minnesota. I was doing my PhD, and first year, tough year, all of that. I got to meet a professor there called Dr. Jim Begon. And Jim just took me under his wings from the first semester. There was a course that I wanted to take that Jim used to offer, but he was not offering it that year. And Jim said, it's okay, I will offer it just for you. And I'm like, just for me? He's like, yep, you and I will meet every Thursday over lunch, and I'll give you readings, and then we'll discuss what you read. And he gave me a course just for myself. That teacher-student relationship developed into me working for him as his research assistant, and then I was his teaching assistant. And Jim was the best boss for me. He saw in me so many things that I didn't see in myself. Kind of what we were saying earlier. He most importantly for him, he wanted to develop me. So many professors in academia or bosses in academia, the main motivation there is, what can I get out of this, right? Can you help me with grading papers? Can you do the research for me? Can you just get me to pub? That was not Jim's motivation, although he was very ambitious. We wanted to publish and we wanted to teach good courses, but his main motivation is, how do I develop me, to be ready when I take my first academic job as a professor in healthcare administration? And he did everything he can to do that. And we're still best friends to this day. I mean, I had a event in Minnesota this summer, and the first thing that I did was find time to connect with Jim in person. We had coffee and we talked, and he shared some additional advice, and he's always that kind of person who is pushing you. He sees things in you that you don't see in yourself. And Jim was telling me about what should my next book be? What should I be focusing on? He's like, there's so much more potential in this idea of a ambitious leader that you're not seeing. So he continued that mentoring relationship 20 years after I stopped working with him.
What a great story. Yeah, and the thing about best bosses, they affect you for a lifetime, and they also affect the people that you lead. So it's almost like a legacy in the making.
Oh, absolutely. I agree totally with that, because when I started my career in academia and I started teaching and mentoring students, the one question that will always ask myself is, what would Jim do in this situation? And
Wow.
and and that's how he has influenced my career. But to your point, he's influenced also all of the students that I have taught and worked with over the last 20 years.
Yeah, and those stories come back to you again and again, and they resonate with you again. It's almost like even if you weren't raised that way, like when you have after bosses, after teachers and family members, bosses are the most influential people for
Absolutely.
a person growing up. So what like bosses and what they teach you goes years out of your experience with them. So I can't thank you enough for your time, and I'm very humbled to have you start on this podcast, and I appreciate it very much. And I'm going to put the link to your books in down below. They're terrific books, and they really help you start to rethink what great leadership is. Um, and and thank you so much.
Oh, absolutely. It's my pleasure, Diane. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.